Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so very much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, well, not really tin cannon string today, at the other end of the table here at Prye's Brewing Company, we have generally useful human and handsome Arif Hassan. Arif,
well, handsome Mr. Hassan.
Handsome Mr. Hassan. Yeah. That was the one that was posted. That's right. I didn't understand whether.
I think I've got a shot with her.
You think you got a shot with that particular bot?
Bot?
Well, was that a bot or was that a scam that was?
I don't know what you're talking about, James.
Okay.
We're in love.
Well, somebody's going to have to tell Chelsea about that and deal with that later. Welcome to this episode of Norse Code. As you can tell, this is the potentially demonetized version of Norse Code as we are recording this over at Prye's Brewing Company in Minneapolis. I happen to be in town, so we decided to do a live-ish show. Sure, let's go with that. So enjoy the tunes in the background while we're going to be doing this. This is the last show before the draft, so we've got a couple special things planned. We got a mailbag as well, so hold on for just a moment as we go into the shilling. If you enjoy the show and would like to help support the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get access to bonus materials, you get access to the Discord, all sorts of fun stuff over at patreon.com/NorseCode. And before we go any further, a big shout out to everyone who signed up after the announcement last week, or last episode rather, that we were giving out stuff for the person who became the 200th Patreon. We did end up giving it out to $199 as well, after he announced himself as the guy who realized he was the idiot for signing up for $199. So thank you, Matt Enger, specifically for being $199. You're awesome. You did get something, or you should be getting something in the mail here shortly. Along with Chris Tarr, thank you so much. Matt also signed up. Also, Eldon Vaisler. You provided me with the pronunciation guide, and I still managed to mess it up. So, apologies, Vaisler, thank you so much, who says, I can finally help keep track of the Loch Ness Monster. Help keep him at bay. You guys are the best Vikings/Seahawks/beekeeping podcast on the web. Thank you, Eldon. And in the name of that, we'll get to some beekeeping later. Also, SD Evo, love you guys and the show. Keep up the awesome work. There's a question from Evo in the mailbag as well, we'll get to in just a little bit. Along with Harrison Fulton, thank you so much for signing up over at Patreon. Again, this helps keep the show ad-free. It also allows us to do cool things like record here over at Prye's Brewing Company. So, I hope you guys are all doing well over on Patreon. Thank you so much. And a special thank you to the Discord, who provided a number of questions today for the episode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to donate as a one-time donation. Also, you can head over to a magical place. You can head over to norsecode.threadless.com.
Jesus Christ.
Where now available... I feel like every episode we should just roll out.
There's a new one for every episode.
A new product. For whatever reason, they now have tapestries, and you can get very large tapestries. As it turns out,
machine washable. They've got little grommets that will allow you to protect the tapestry when you hang it up. I don't know why I'm talking about why it's a good thing to buy it. Don't buy it. Buy the other things.
There is a 59-inch by 80-inch option for the tapestry for $60.70, which honestly, that's a steal. Anytime you have the ability to do that, you should just throw money at norsecode.threadless.com. Check out the home section over in the tapestries part. So that is just wrong. So let's get into the actual show itself. We have an interview. We haven't had an interview for a little bit. We're going to go to an interview that Arif recorded yesterday with Luke Inman, talking more about the draft.
All right, I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, Luke Spinman. What is going on, dude?
Holy smokes, man. What's your name? I feel like you sound familiar. Did we used to do stuff back in the day, or what's going on? What's your name?
No, it's your boy Jerry. It's Jerry,
Come
on.
It's Jerry from White Bear Lake. There he is. I think we all got a little Jerry from White Bear Lake in us, don't we?
Yeah, a little bit.
Man, no, honestly, yeah. Been a little MIA as of late, but glad to be back in the draft scene, sports broadcasting scene, all that good stuff. Good timing. Draft coming up, obviously, right around the corner. So glad you invited me on, man. Great to chat some Vikes and obviously NFL draft coming up.
Yeah. We'll talk about the draft, but first, I gotta know, why are you back? What have you been up to? What took so long? What's going on?
Man, well, to be honest, and I'll give you the quick 30-second elevator pitch before we lose all our listeners. But no, I tried a little career change for a little bit. Gave it about 18, 24 months. Got into the real estate, house flipping, contractor game. Know a guy.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd kind of put the podcast, writing, things like that, kind of in the back of my mind. But always still still had a passion for it, but ended up just getting the right phone call from the right guy one day, not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. Sam Ekstrom, I'm sure some of your listeners remember Sam from Zone Coverage, our days back at the Football Machine podcast, and had a great job opening over at Locked On Podcasts. We're doing the Superior Sports Talk podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Minnesota. Co-hosted with Reggie.
James, edit that out. All right, yeah. Sorry, what was that?
Cut that out. Co-hosting with Reggie Wilson, getting to know him now. Again, we're about 2 weeks in the books, got about 9 episodes out there. Really great guy, sports anchor for Care 11. So, yeah, man, definitely went MIA there for a little bit. But again, glad to be back. Again, kind of get my feet underneath me a little bit and just couldn't stay away for another draft season.
Dude, that rules. Dude, okay, so our listeners probably know.
Hold on. What about you? What did I miss here? Okay, I feel like you're like an international superstar now. Okay,
like I'm still at the Athletic.
Your stock was rising. Okay, when I bailed out, your stock was rising, but I feel like you're no. I feel like you're on another stratosphere, man. Just crushing it for the Athletic. It sounds like, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm still there, man. It's
awesome.
It's all good, dude.
All right, are we gonna do a Football Machine Zone Coverage reunion show someday?
You
draft, candy draft.
Talk to Sam about that. You got to talk to Sam about that. We'll get that done.
Absolutely.
Maybe even a live show, right? That'd be dope.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you're here to talk about the Vikings. So the number one question on everyone's mind, the Vikings decided not to offer the fifth-year option to Garrett Bradbury. Are you devastated?
Oh my gosh, I've been losing sleep over it. Okay, wake up in the middle of the night, I'm sweating bullets. I remember, we were at, you and I, and Sam as well. We were at TCO that night, that first round Thursday night when they drafted Bradbury. A lot of high expectations. Again, he was a former tight end. Tons of athletic ability. I think this scheme fit is what excited and made sense when you're drafting an interior lineman that high in the first round. Again, a lot of pressure on those first round picks. It's just so hard to miss. It sets your franchise back so much when you miss on that first round pick. So he seemed like the safe pick, obviously. And again, when you look at Kirk Cousins' skill set, I don't know if you know this, not the most mobile guy in the world.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, hot take. I know. And doesn't even have necessarily, good pocket presence, but doesn't even have that Tom Brady in the pocket, ability to move around and create some extra time in the pocket, like some other really good pure pocket passers. But we all thought it made sense, right? Ton said, we need an interior blocker. Kirk Cousins needs this. He fits the zone scheme that we're going to run. And here we are again, like you said, 3-4 years later, and he just really hasn't panned out. Like you're expecting that Frank Ragnow type of production that Detroit got when they selected a center in the first round.
Minnesota native Frank Ragnow.
That's right. Put some respect on it. And I just think it just hasn't lived up to that hype. I think the lack of ability to really anchor a lot of those big. I just don't think he not him himself, but I just don't know if he was ready for the physicality that came from coming from NC State into the NFL when it comes to these 3 techs and nose tackles that he lines up against every play in and out. He didn't seem to have that sand in the pants, as they like to say, as you always like to say.
I'm known for using that phrase. Yeah,
you've never said that. And I just think that really inability to anchor
here's the thing
is where
that's
it struggled. Yeah.
Here's the thing that's really interesting to me. Yeah. So remember on draft night, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah called him the Grim Reacher because he was so good at reach blocks.
That's right.
Yeah. Phenomenal nickname.
That's
the thing about Garrett Bradbury that stands out to me 4 years later, I think it's 4 years later, is nobody was wrong about the things he was good at or the things he was bad at. Everyone knew what he was good at. Everyone knew what he was bad at. That turned out to be true in the NFL. The things he was good at, he remained good at. The things he was bad at, he remained bad at. But how bad he was at the bad things, I think is what got us. And him not improving on those areas was kind of the big area. Well, the Vikings could do that again, but I think it's unlikely that the Vikings take an undersized center, which, by the way, the undersized centers in this draft, I love them. So I don't think that that's a reason not to grab them. But the Vikings are not likely to grab a center at 12 overall. So my thoughts to you, do you think, first, that the Vikings pick at 12? And if so, who do they pick?
Well, I think the dream, and I would love to know where you're at with this guy. I know you've done a lot of homework with the consensus big boards, where the public's at, where a lot of, again, NFL draft experts are at. But I think the dream is Kyle Hamilton. And if you asked me 2 months ago for having this conversation, I was going to ask,
I've got some questions specifically about Hamilton for you, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's no way we're even having this conversation. I mean, he's supposed to be long gone. We know the NFL doesn't value the safeties as much as maybe some other people, but I think you watch Derwin James, who a lot of people had top 5, top 3 prospect a few years ago. He drops to 17 to the Chargers. So you're thinking, okay, maybe it could happen. Again, I still don't think he will be there, but if he is, I think that's one that you're kind of running up to the podium.
Not everybody knows where you have Hamilton ranked.
Right.
I do. Let the people know.
Numero uno, number 1 player on my board. I don't want to, spoiler alert, give out the rest of the top 5, top 10, which I think there's a couple spicy takes in there. But I think Kyle Hamilton,
it's all spicy. I'm looking at it. It's all spicy.
Did you like
top
it?
5, yeah, it's not until you get 6 that you're like, okay, I was waiting for this guy.
Back to normal.
7, I was waiting for this guy. Right.
Back to normal. Back to earth a little bit. Jamison Williams 2, Jordan Davis 3. We'll save that one for the next episode. But sure. Hamilton, again, I just think he checks all those boxes. I know maybe this is another reason. Maybe all of a sudden he's being talked about falling out of the top 10. He didn't have a great combine, right? I mean, he didn't run that fast 40 that we were looking for.
This is the interesting part. So he runs a 4.59 40. Everyone agrees. Awful result, especially given the skill set, right? Not like good. If he was a 200, and he is 220 pounds, so that's worth pointing out. That's an unusually large safety. If he's a 220-pound box safety, or if he's a 220-pound linebacker, we'd be talking about how he ran just fast enough in the 40. Yep. And then here's the thing: all of his other workouts, every single other workout that he did, were among the position best, if not the position best. Absolutely nuts. Vertical, broad jump, short shuttle, 3-cone, right? Like his 3-cone was like 6'7" or something crazy like that, right?
Right.
And so when people say bad combine, they usually just mean bad 40. Right. So my question is, why didn't that 40 time? Because when he ran at the pro day, it was slower. Remember that discussion we had like 3-4 years ago?
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Yeah.
I thought of you. I literally almost text you because I started banging the table. I said, Arif, everybody has a better pro day than their combine. You go, no, you're nuts, man. And I'll pull up the data. And of course,
I know this isn't the case.
It's not. No, proven wrong once again by the king. I hail to you.
But it wasn't just a worse pro day. It was catastrophically. It was weird. A 4.7.
Right. Not good.
So
not good. And
why doesn't that scare you? I mean, because you have it's not that you have him high. A lot of people have him high. You have him number 1.
Yep.
So why doesn't that scare you? At least from number 1, like move him down a couple of spots. No, you still got him number 1.
Well, I think, first of all, this is a draft class that doesn't really have a ton of surefire number 1 picks at any position.
Strongly agree. Yeah.
I think just in general, this isn't the strongest class. So even though he's my number 1, if we were to stack him up against previous year's big boards, he may not be in the top 5 or 7 or 8. So that just kind of goes to show, the unique fingerprint that this class has versus other ones. But nonetheless, I just think when you look at the tape, he plays faster than what he ran. And remember, I don't know if you saw this angle that they showed, but if you actually watch him, and I'm thinking there's no way he did this again at the pro day, but he got off to a horrible first 10 split. He almost ran outside of the white line when he was running that 40 in Indianapolis. So as far as just the actual just, hey, dude, all you got to do is run in a straight line. Okay, didn't check that box. But again, going back, dude, what, you're an athlete? Going back to the tape, I just think he still has the instincts and the eyes and enough speed to play over the top. He's got the strength and toughness to play near the line, and that length and kind of elite, he can guard those elite pass catching tight ends, who that's such a big part of this game in the NFL is finding the one mismatch. I don't need 4 guys to win. I just need one guy to create a mismatch. And I think a lot of times we're seeing it with these elite pass catching tight ends shifting out in the slot, even out to the boundary, could be a running back, but you need these safeties to be able to be big and physical enough to cover and guard those big, tall tight ends. And you also need them quick enough, not necessarily straight line speed, but quick enough to be able to, guard and cover a lot of those running backs too when they flanker those guys out. So I just think he's a guy that when teams try to find the mismatch and throw out those, bigger tight ends or stack a big bodied receiver in the slot, he's a guy that can help combat some of those X factor mismatches that offenses in the league now are trying to run. And I think it's just rare to find just such a great tackler, striker, a physicality part to his game with the football intelligence, the athletic prowess. Because again, I'm going to say athletic prowess like that, and people are going to go, but Luke, he only ran a 4.7. But like you said, he had a great combine outside of that, makes plays in the passing game. And I just think Hamilton, again, he provides it all, what I'm looking for, again, in today's NFL.
All right, so here's one way to test kind of what you said here, because one thing I found kind of interesting at the very beginning of what you said, or maybe not the beginning, it's kind of a long rant. You go on
the
rants.
ramble. Yep.
Yeah. Is to take a look at the flying 20. Remember we talked about this too in the past.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Yep. If it's the case, right, and you brought up like, hey man, of all the things when we were talking about a piece of data, you go to the tape on that data. Love that about you. That's funny. You're like, hey, you look at the 40-yard dash. He actually runs sideways. I think if you look at the film of the 40-yard dash, I was like, okay,
all right, fair enough. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll give him this one time. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, I was like, well, okay, if that's the case, then surely by the time he crosses the 20-yard line, he'll have hit his full stride. Sure. And taking the flying 20 will give us a good...
better indicator, right?
Yeah, he ran that slow too. I'm sorry, Luke. Yeah. Gosh,
I don't love it. All right.
No, I love Kyle Hamilton. So my take, and I've said this before on the podcast, is if it's between Derek Stingley, who I value a lot, who I think is quite good, and Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton's there. I don't think it's a question. I think you take Kyle Hamilton. And I know I know that the Vikings need a cornerback and they don't need a safety. We're both high on Cameron Bynum, right?
Yes,
we both like him a lot.
Yep.
And so you've got Harrison Smith, obviously high on him. Cameron Bynum, we like him. Kyle Hamilton, the Vikings will figure out how to put 3 safeties on the field.
I hope so. And they've done that in the past. Obviously, brand new regime here. So you got to throw everything from the last 5-6 years with Zimmer out. But they did run a lot of those 3 safety looks. George Iloka came in. He ran a lot of those 3 safety looks. So certainly, again, yes, you find a way. And
Cameron Bynum, after he replaced Xavier Woods because of injury, he played so well that Zimmer was like, okay, we got to find a... There were 3 safety sets after Bynum started when Xavier Woods came back.
Love that.
So that's something that they've thought about. And look who they brought in. They brought in Mike Patton, who's run a bunch of 3 safety in Green Bay, right?
Yes.
They bring in, obviously the defensive coordinator at Donatel has run a little bit, not a ton in Denver, but a little bit of 3 safety because Kareem Jackson sometimes will be... because he used to play corner back with Houston, right? And so sometimes we're like, well, why you could slot in at the slot. We'll put the other safety in the field. We got 3 safeties now. So that's something that's kind of interesting.
Real quick, I want to ask you, because there's so many more, let's just say mobile quarterbacks just to start. And the way that kind of the NFL is using those mobile quarterbacks, don't you think defenses just have to find a way to get more speed on the field to defend those, not necessarily just in a quarterback spy, but find speed and get it on the field to combat some of, again, this new age NFL from maybe 10, 15 years ago. You got to get speed, and that means probably more DBs, right? More 3 safety looks. Do you think that's a reason that we've seen a little bit more of those different coverages defensively?
I think so. And I think that one thing you have to be aware of is that if you're replacing a linebacker with a safety, that guy needs to be able to hit. We know Kyle Hamilton can do that. We also know that for a safety, he has a size. He's 220 pounds, right? Like that's don't, if your third safety is
he'll get bigger too.
190 pounds.
Yeah,
he'll
get bigger. Yeah.
He's got that frame. If your third safety is 190 pounds, if your biggest safety is 190 pounds, that's not a problem unless he's your third safety replacing a linebacker. And you take a look at the division, you've got Aaron Rodgers that'll transition to Jordan Love. You've got Justin Fields. What if the Lions draft like Malik Willis or Desmond Ridder?
Right.
That's a ton of speed to put on the field.
Well, even outside of the division, to your point, just look at the amount of mobile quarterbacks that there are that feast on 3rd and 13, and all of a sudden he gets outside the pocket and it's a fresh set of downs. I mean, that is devastating. That's a backbreaker for defenses to have to try to, oh my God, I called the perfect defensive play. Everybody's in great coverage. And Patrick Mahomes, just for example, scrambles for 15. I mean, it's a heartbreaker. So yeah, you're certainly right. And I don't want to get too off topic, but you brought up Cam Byman. I want to ask you, do you think he has the potential to maybe line up a little bit at cornerback as well for the Vikings? Do you think they're thinking about that at all? Right.
I think so. I think that's but the thing is, the Vikings did ask him just a little bit. Remember, because they had like 18 cornerbacks injured.
Right. Justin Pullman still in the building.
Right.
My guy.
If only. Turns out you were right on him. The Vikings were wrong.
Right.
If they did play him a little bit at corner, he was not remarkable, and you began to see why he was a safety convert. There's some other safety converts. One that actually you've got ranked pretty highly, I think, Cam Taylor-Britt, that could play nickel, could play safety. JT Woods is probably another good example of that. Again, another
Daxton
person
Hill,
particularly high on him. Daxton Hill, who's marked as a safety, you could play. So like there's a bunch of those in the class. I think it's happening a little bit more often, or at least maybe it's a trend, maybe it's random, I don't know. But that's something to kind of keep in mind too. Now, if we both think that it is unlikely that Kyle Hamilton will be there, and I think it speaks to the class, because if I asked you to rank, and I'm going to put my opinion of your opinion out there first, and then you tell me if I'm right or wrong. But if I put Kyle Hamilton up against Derwin James, my guess is that you would rank Derwin James higher. I know that I would. Derwin James in that 2018 draft, and mind you, that 2018 draft, I think, had a much better top to it. It was much more top heavy. Derwin James went 17th overall.
Insane. And going into that, and first of all, answer your question. Am I
right or wrong?
First of all, you're 100% right. Derwin James, I would absolutely have higher. Maybe it's a little bit closer than I'm making it sound, but Derwin James for sure I would have higher. I think I had him ranked top 3, for sure top 5 coming out. The fact that he fell all the way to 17 should give some fans.
He wasn't even the top safety off the board. It was Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Unbelievable. And props to Minkah. I mean, no knock on Minkah. Minkah's outstanding, right? But Derwin James, especially coming out, I don't remember a lot of question marks or red flags that would have him, do the Randy Moss drop when it comes to your talent and your production, what you've done versus where you fell on draft night. The only thing I wrap my head around is that, again, the league just doesn't value safeties quite as much as maybe I would or some other people would. So, absolutely, though. Derwin James, 100%. Remember, I think it was the Chargers versus the Ravens. I think it was Lamar's rookie year, maybe his second year, and nobody had figured out how to stop Lamar yet. How do you stop Lamar? The cheat code, you couldn't stop him. And it was the Chargers who put out 7 DBs, speed on the field. And I'm not saying that you can just do that and get away with it for 4 quarters. But again, when it comes to how do we stop these mobile quarterbacks, everybody's mobile. Josh Allen, mobile, running at 250 pounds. I mean, it's tough to figure out a way to stop these guys, especially on the third key downs like third and long. And I just think it's very interesting the way the league has kind of shifted with these mobile quarterbacks. And again, kind of that cat and mouse game. How do you stop them? Remember, 7-8 years ago, it was all the big-bodied wide receivers, Megatron, Julio, a couple other big ones. Okay, let's go try to find the Richard Shermans. Well, then the league combats that. All right, you're going to bring out big, strong, physical, lanky corners. How do we stop that? All right, quick, shifty, great route runners, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett's, people like that. And there's always this cat and mouse game going on. So mobile quarterbacks, I think, every defensive coordinator in the league loses sleep at night trying to figure out how to stop these guys. I think the way you do it is a lot of 3 safety looks, is a lot of 6 or 7 DBs, and having that third safety, as much as we love Cam Bynum, I think a lot of Vikings fans, should celebrate very, very much if Kyle Hamilton fell and the Vikings took him. Well, okay, if he fell to 12 and they didn't take him,
he'd have some words. Yeah. So, okay. Well, but we think that that's pretty unlikely. Both of us do.
Correct.
So what is the most likely good pick that the Vikings can make?
Boy, here's my thing. I look at this new regime, and there's just so much pressure to hit on this first-round pick. There's pressure for any GM to hit on a first-round pick, but especially when you're talking those first 12, 15 picks, I think Jordan Davis. And I know people are going to say a nose tackle. What are you, nuts, dude? Well, look at what Vita Vea did for the Bucks, and the last 2 years they're the number 1 rush D in the league. If you're going to run a 3-4, you have to have a big, stout, physical nose that can chew up those blockers. We had Ron Johnson on the Superior Sports Talk just a few days ago, and he talked about the value specifically in a 3-4. You look at the great 3-4 defenses over the last 20 years. Patriots, 3-4 dynasty, Vince Wilfork in the middle. You look at guys like Albert Hainsworth did for so long. They make such a big difference, not only in that 3-4, but for the guys around them. I think Jordan Davis is just such a clean, safe pick that if you're worried about a Derek Stingley and that Liz Frank injury, which, by the way, again, 2 weeks ago, we're trying to debate whether we want Derek Stingley. He might not even be there now, 2 weeks later, a couple days leading up to the draft. But if you're worried about the Liz Frank injury, if you're worried about the tape the last 2 years, go watch the UCLA game. Horrible, really bad tape. But obviously, the potential is there. I just think Jordan Davis is just such a safe pick, and he's a guy that you could probably trade down and recoup that extra 4th-round pick and probably a little bit more. And I just think he's going to make everybody around him better. Arif, who's our 3rd defensive lineman? I mean, do we feel good with DJ Wanham making that shift from 4-3 base DN into a 5-tech? I'm not sure I do, and I just think that Jordan Davis would just kind of check that D-line box in this 3-4 new system under Mike Pettin and Ed Donatel, and I just think it's a safe, easy pick.
So if you do that, you're definitely putting, and Jordan Davis is one of my favorite players in the draft. I love watching him. So that's, so I love him, right? I don't know if it's the best pick for the Vikings. I don't know how much I would complain if the Vikings picked him, but I don't think it's probably the right pick. What you do then, of course, is you make sure that Dalvin Tomlinson is playing defensive end, which he did at Alabama. He did that a little bit with New York. It's not an unusual position for him to play as a 3-4 defensive end. Right. And I think, a lot of Vikings fans will have to get used to saying defensive end and meaning essentially a defensive tackle. But he played 3-4 defensive end. And this is back when the Giants were like, we're going to have 3 nose tackles on the field. 2 of them are going to be defensive ends. We got Dalvin Tomlinson, we got BJ Hill, and we got Dexter Lawrence, I think was the 3.
Great name drafts. Yes, absolutely.
And BJ Hill at NC State. What a great line. They had, because they had Bradley Chubb, they had other great defensive tackle, and I think they had another 3rd rounder, I want to say, at edge rusher. That guy didn't pan out, but he was great in college. So
correct.
So if that happens, you move Dalvin Tomlinson out to defensive end. You put Harrison Phillips out there, the new signing, probably also at defensive end, which he also did play a fair amount.
Which I'm fine with.
That's not unusual. Absolutely. And then you've got Jordan Davis at the nose tackle. My question for you then, in that scenario, is what do you do on 3rd down when it's 3rd and long?
No, you're right. And this
none of those guys are pass rushers.
No,
you could argue that Jordan Davis has the athletic, but we haven't seen it.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is kind of my other big question mark, and it wraps back around to what are we doing with this 2021 class? Because there's still a lot of question marks and uncertainty. And I know a lot of people just writing this whole class off already. All right, we got Christian Darrisaw, Kenny Nwangu. Oh, okay, whatever. Cam Bynum, sure. But everybody else, Janarius Robinson, Patrick Jones. I mean,
so that was going to be my answer to your question, is that maybe it's Patrick Jones.
Right. Is that the guy? Right. And we just don't know. We just haven't seen enough from him,
James Lynch, that's the position he played in college.
Yeah, that was the other guy. And I think James Lynch has shown enough. Granted, again, he's switching now from a 4-3 to 3-4, but I think James Lynch has shown enough for me to be a guy that you can at least start with him and feel good enough that, he's starting to develop and progress. On third down specifically, he showed enough, ability to break down the pocket, rush the passer, and at least get him off his spot and create some plays for some other guys. So it's a valid question. You're right. Jordan Davis, all right, more of a 2-down guy, but that's setting up the third and longs, and then you pin your ears back with obviously Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, guys like that. But you're right. What's the D line look like on third down now that you drafted Jordan Davis? Nonetheless, aren't we still going to have the same question whether we draft Jordan Davis or not? But James Lynch, you're right. Again, Patrick Jones, a lot of question marks. I'm just in general, whether it's D-line or the rest of it, I'm just curious what's going to happen with this 2021 class. You're talking about 4 third-round picks, 3 fourth-round picks. Again, a couple of them, like we mentioned, Kenny Nwangu, Cam Bynum, we already talked about, a couple hits there, but a lot of high, early top 100 picks that there's just a lot of question marks, and I'm not ready to give up on them quite yet.
So you mentioned him very briefly once, but I think a lot of people, the answer to the question I asked you originally for a lot of people, other people, would have been Derek Stingley. You have Derek Stingley ranked 31st. You've got 5. I counted manually, so maybe correct me if I'm wrong. You have 5 corners ahead of him: Sauce Gardner, Tariq Woolen, who most people have the second to fourth round. We can talk about him for a second because I think he's one of the most interesting players in the draft. Trent McDuffie, who people got mad at me for drafting in the first round. What? Andrew Booth Jr. We could talk about that. Andrew Booth Jr., that's a medicals question, I think, mostly. And Roger McCreary, who I actually drafted in the second round. People got mad at that. Basically, same reason as Trent McDuffie. They both got these tiny baby arms.
Yep, they do. But go watch the Alabama-Auburn game. Oh, my God. Roger McCreary might have been the best player on the field. So, yeah, not that high end.
I think he might have the best on-ball production of anybody in the class. Maybe Kobe Bryant. I don't know.
I love that.
But,
yep, absolutely. Yeah, so, okay, yeah, I got
you've got 5 corners ahead of Derek Stingley.
No, you're right. It's first of all, the last 2, how much of a break are we giving this guy? I know, phenomenal freshman season. But the last 2 years, again, I brought it up, go back and watch like the UCLA tape. It's not good, man. It's not. He was checked out. And again, for a first round pick, that scares the hell out of me. I can't miss on my first round pick if I'm a GM. And I just think he's got all the potential in the world. I wish him the best. Whoever drafts him, he'll probably, it sounds like, go in the top 10. I could see a team like Seattle taking him, either the New York teams taking him. But that Liz Frank injury scares me as well. I mean, that's for cornerbacks and wide receivers. That Liz Frank injury scares the heck out of me. And this is my big board. I know it's a little bit, compared to the consensus board, a little out there, but
that's what we like, though. That's what we like.
I hope so. I hope you appreciate it. I hope you respected it, at least, as another draft expert. But I just think that
you saw. We have a mutual friend that I can't name because he works
legally.
Legally,
Your Honor, legally.
He professionally evaluates for a living, so I don't want to name him.
Okay, I got it. Yep,
but we saw his board, right? It was 1,500 players.
Yep. Love this.
And it was much crazier than your board, right?
He's always wild. He's a wild card.
Yeah, it's great. I love
maybe the best from an entertainment standpoint. It's maybe the best big board you'll ever see.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yep.
So you never have to worry about that. Yep. So you're talking about, hey, in the first round, you can't mess up this guy, right? That's something that you said. Yep. I get it. But what's really interesting is I was able to get Excel to do some work for me and generate which guys you're the highest, or anybody, right? I could just enter anybody's name and Excel spit it out. And I sent it to you. It's this long list. It's usually not this long, but Luke, your board is a little weird. Which guys are you high on? Which guys are you low on compared to the consensus? And I noticed a trend here. And if you want to keep your board secret, I'll name who the guys are that you're high on, but I won't name necessarily what number you have all of them at.
I'll name it for you. I mean, Tariq Woolen, Troy Anderson, athletes. Luke, what are you doing, man? Yeah, I'm betting on athletes. But
Christian Watson, Amari Barno, JT Woods, Kalen Bartz, athlete. Zion McCollum, maybe the best cornerback athlete in the class. Jordan Davis, athlete.
Yep.
Right?
But the difference is the majority outside of maybe one or two of those guys also produced the last 2 years. And I can't say the same thing
but what does it mean to produce at NDSU, man? Also, have you seen Troy Anderson versus NDSU?
No, I don't want to talk about that.
I don't know. Oh, Zion McCollum, Sam Houston State. Same problem with Christian Watson producing at an FCS school. An FCS school that, by the way, had one of the most disappointing FCS seasons we've seen in a while given the level of talent they had.
Ouch.
Amari Barno, you're high on. I don't remember him producing a ton.
No, you're right. It's a fair argument. Again, maybe it has more to do with that Lynn Frank injury, but I just think the way he checked out from his team those last 2 years really bugs me. It just scares the heck out of me. And you're right to bring up those names. I am gambling a lot this year on high-end, a big ceiling type of guys, which is, in theory, Derek Stingley. I just think that when you look at some of those other guys, I still think I can't do anything that they played at a small school, Reef. There's nothing I can do. But Troy Anderson...
You can rank them lower. That's what you can do.
Oh, don't do that to me, man. Don't do that. Edit that out. Dusty, edit that out. Troy Anderson, 146 tackles, FCS Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, a lot of those guys did produce. Not all of them, you're right. But I am gambling quite a bit on that high-end, high ceiling. And I think a lot of those guys didn't check out the way the last, not 1 year, but 2 years that Stingley did. They also don't necessarily have the injury concerns, though. No, you're right.
Yeah, that's a different kind of risk. I understand where you're getting at. I just wanted you to say it.
Absolutely. All right. Legally, you have that on record. Your Honor.
Okay. Well, okay. But that kind of reminds me of someone else that you're low on. Mm-hmm. Same questions. I don't think the questions are as severe for him as they are for Stingley in terms of checking out. But it is a question that a lot of people have had. Kayvon Thibodeau, you don't have him in your top 32. You have him just out there, 33, unless the board has changed since we last looked at it.
No, you're right. That one is probably the one that I had a really hard time with. I had the most hard time with him. And he didn't make my top 32, like you said. And he'll probably end up going number 2 overall. I mean, I don't know if he'll end up going to the Lions or maybe Houston or somebody like that. He's probably going to go top 5 at the lowest, right? But I just, when I look at the rest of those guys above him, I'm just willing to gamble on those guys a little bit more than Thibodeau. And I can't sit here and say, I know people in the industry have sit here and say, oh, well, he too checked out a lot. Or there was, I forget who it was, but somebody in a program that played Oregon said, hey, did you have to do anything special against Thibodeau? No, we didn't do anything special. This guy doesn't scare us that much. Okay, I can't get into the he said, she said. I don't know. I'm not an insider, but I think he certainly has those traits. He could be one of the better edge rushers to come out for sure if he lands in the right system with the right coaching. He's young. He's got a huge ceiling in front of him. But I don't like him. I just for a top 5 pick, I don't like him. I just don't. I want 4 or 5 games with him, and I'm just not that high on him like a lot of other people, and I just didn't see the same things that a lot of those other experts saw.
So one thing that I found in this edge rusher class, just to speak real quickly on that question, is normally when we've got, and this is a good edge rusher class. I don't think anybody...
It is, yes.
Yeah, it's a good edge rusher class. But the one thing it doesn't seem to have, and this is kind of interesting to me, is you go through the top edge rushers in the class. You can find this a little bit in the 3rd and 4th rounds. You don't have guys with a ton of bend. Right? Like it's a bunch of guys with explosion, flexibility, and agility, but not like Von Miller. He can run
George
around under the table.
Purdue kid, George. I'm blanking on his name. Purdue. Yeah. I mean, 6'2", not a lot of bend. No, you're absolutely right. This is a very good, both at the top and for depth DN class. But you're right. Not a lot of guys that you can bank on just letting loose, pinning their ears back and get around the edge on some of these next level NFL tackles. It's going to be interesting. I don't know who you necessarily have higher on your boards compared to lower when it comes to those edge guys, but I'd be interested just to hear maybe your top couple guys that you think is going to have a pretty productive, early on in their career when it comes to just producing at the NFL.
Yeah, that one's interesting, right? Because I don't love the top 2 in the class. Now, I'm much higher, I think, on...
Not when you stack them up against the last few years, right? I mean,
Right.
no
Well,
Chase Youngs, right? I mean,
no Bosa's, no Miles
Bosa's,
Garrett's.
no. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the issues. Maybe that's what I'm looking for, and we're just not seeing it. I'm a little bit less optimistic about Trayvon Walker, who you have ranked high. Again, athletes without production, who you have ranked high, but like, I get the argument for him. I cover Danielle Hunter for a living. I get the argument for him, right?
Right.
It's tough for me to think that you can kind of strike gold twice, right?
Right.
And so that's and I think he should be drafted high. I just don't think about top 10 overall. So I'm looking at the top 2. I'm looking at the top 3, and I don't know that I would have them in the top 15 of a normal class that has edge rushers that you like. But then I get into guys that I think you would draft in the middle of the first round that will probably be there in the middle of the first round. People like Jermaine Johnson. I like him.
Oh, I like him a lot. Yeah,
right?
And Jermaine, what I love about him too, sorry to interrupt, is just he comes in so rounded and ready to stop the run. He's not just, a lot of times you get the big flashy.
He's the best run defender in the class.
He's so good against the run. I feel so good about throwing him in there on first and second down.
Yeah,
like
I think
Danielle
he's ready
Hunter
to play
was.
right away. Yeah,
like Danielle Hunter was.
Yeah,
very underrated
exactly.
part of his game.
That's the great point to bring up about Danielle Hunter, which I don't even think is necessarily true for Trayvon Walker. Right? Is that
no, you're absolutely
was
right.
A phenomenal run defender coming out.
Yeah, and the way he just seals that edge, and I just think when, during draft, pre-draft process, anytime an edge guy gets brought up, we always, like we probably should, it's so important, such a huge impact part of the game, talk about how they're going to get after the passer, but are they just a guy that you're just only going to get value on third down? I mean, first round pick, I need a guy that can play all 3 downs. What was the I'm blanking on his name, the edge we traded, second round pick for? We ended up trading him back.
Unique
Ngakoue, pretty much one of those guys that can only really count on third down. Pin his ears back, maybe one of the better, if not, top 5 when it comes to just pinning your ears back and getting after the quarterback. But am I going to use a first round pick on a guy that I know has no value right away on first and second down? That's why I love Jermaine Johnson, so good against the run. That's why I think Danielle Hunter doesn't get enough credit for. I think that's something that Danielle Hunter doesn't get enough credit for, being able to be effective on first and second down, not just the, put up the big tackles for loss, the sack production, things like that on third and long, pin your ears back and just go. I want a well-rounded guy. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years, Jermaine Johnson is the best edge from this class.
Yeah, I would bet that he's not, just because you've got 5.
There's a lot of names.
Yeah, you've got 5 dart throws at guys that have a higher ceiling than him.
Totally.
But I think if you look 5 years down the road and asked who was the most productive over those first 5 years in total, who has the highest number of tackles for loss, the highest number of sacks, I think it might be Jermaine Johnson, because I think in the first 2 years he's got a really good chance to be the most productive, and then
impact right away. Yeah.
And then I think by year 3, one of those 5 guys is going to, and maybe there's a guy in the 3rd or 4th round, one of those guys is going to come out and demonstrate that they're going to be one of those. So like that I think is what's interesting. And then you get down to the 2nd and 3rd round. Now you're higher on Amari Barno than anybody else, but there's a couple of other edge defenders that are really good athletes that are worth talking about. There's a shorter guy, the Penn State guy. Ebiketie?
Yeah.
Ebiketie? I think it's Ebiketie.
Yep.
So he's what, like 6'2", 6'2.5"?
Yep.
And typically you've got your edge rushers 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" is kind of the golden range. But we've been seeing, I think, edge rushers get smaller over the years, because I remember when Danielle Hunter was drafted, 255 pounds.
Yeah.
That was actually the lightest edge rusher that had been drafted by a Mike Zimmer team going back to his early days in Cincinnati. They're all 260 to 280 pounds, right? And now you see a 280-pound guy, you're like, yeah, he's a defensive tackle, right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so, this guy is 246 pounds. And the thing about that is you see some 240, 250-pound guys, and they're 6'5". This guy is 6'2", right? And so it's kind of, he's not going to gain any more weight.
Right.
But he's one of the frame. Right, he's one of the few guys that does have a little bit of bend in this class. He's got a remarkable amount of overall athleticism. He's a guy that I think will be there in round 2, that if you're looking for an edge rusher, you've got to rank 21. So you clearly think this, but a guy that'll be there in round 2 that I think has got a lot of opportunity to produce. Why aren't other people higher on? Is it just the height thing, or is there something else?
No, certainly the height thing, I'm sure, is a red flag right away for a lot of maybe teams, GMs, scouts, things like that. He didn't start playing, if I'm not wrong, until his sophomore year of high school. He didn't really come on until late at Penn State. I think he transferred from Temple. So a lot of untapped.
Fifth-year guy. He's an older guy. Yeah.
Fifth-year guy, older guy, which that's another thing we need to talk about. Again, Kwesi coming from the Browns. I mean, they never touched anybody over 21 and a half, maybe even 22-year-olds. Sometimes they were scared off. They just crossed them right off their board. With the pandemic, so many guys stayed for that 5th year. They're going to have to bend their rules a little bit. Is Kwesi just going to do his own thing? We don't know, but certainly, again, Kwesi could just copy and paste that same mentality and philosophy. And I think the good news is, because of the pandemic and a lot of guys came back, you do get a lot more tape on a lot of these guys too to study them. So pros and cons to both. But Ebiketie, I don't know if he's necessarily known for that bend, but I agree with you. I think he's loose around the edge. He's got good bend. I think he's got great hands. I think the hands really is what kind of popped out to me on tape.
For a guy late to football, no less.
Exactly. And I think he also fits very well standing up as that 3-4 rush linebacker. Again, maybe a little bit lack of size. I think it makes more sense in a 3-4 than as a base 4-3 defensive end. So, I like him a lot. I think, again, the upside's huge. David Ojabo, obviously, he's going to slip now because of the ACL. Does he rise just a little bit and get drafted maybe 5-10 spots earlier because of that? Maybe, but certainly a sub-package pass rusher early in his career. And I think if you develop, that hand usage that I really like, I think he could be really, really good.
All right. Well, so one thing before we get into like day 2 guys for the Vikings, one thing I've seen floated a little bit is the question of like, well, what if they don't draft a cornerback or an offensive lineman? Now, you already answered that with Jordan Davis, but I think most people have said, well, why not, somebody like Jamison Williams if he's there? What about Olave or Garrett Wilson? Or what do you think about the idea of the Vikings drafting a wide receiver at not even trading down, just at 12?
I wouldn't be shocked or surprised. We know how much they're going to use the 11 personnel. We all love KJ Osborne. He's solid, but maybe they want more depth behind that. I think if Jamison Williams there and you want a receiver, it better be Jamison Williams. I think if he's there...
Well, you've got him pretty high. You got him 2 overall.
Well, he reminds me a lot of Tyreek Hill when he was healthy. I mean, he's just a game changer with that home run speed that, again, finding the mismatch is what this league is all about on the field when it's 11 on 11. I just need one guy to create that mismatch. I think Jamison Williams certainly is that guy. There's a lot of other receivers I like. Chris Olave, I think, is the best route runner in this class. Drake London obviously offers a lot different skill set. The big body, go up and get it, basketball Mike Evans type of play. I think he was on pace to lead the country in receiving yards and touchdowns, things like that, before he got hurt about halfway through the season at USC. So there's a lot of great wideouts. I wouldn't be surprised if they went that route. It just, especially in this with Kevin O'Connell, it's a pass-happy league, man. I mean, these guys probably want to spread it out 4 or 5 wide. We don't know what's going to happen with Irv Smith. I think we all try to project him as being a stand-up tight end out in the slot that was going to be able to add a lot in the passing game. When he's healthy and he's on the field, he's been able to be an impact. But can you count on him? I mean, maybe they're looking at tight end. Who's our tight end 2 right now? Zach Davidson, SMU? I doubt it. But getting back to receiver, I wouldn't be shocked in the least if they did. Again, I think if you're thinking about that route and Jamison Williams on the board, you better not get scared off because, he's going to miss the first 6-8 games. But what about the other 50 that you're going to get with that 5th-year option? You're going to get a lot of production. I think he's just clearly the best receiver of the bunch. So it wouldn't shock me in the least bit. How about you? I mean, what's your stance on that? Receiver certainly gets thrown out quite a bit in Vikings Twitter and things like that when we're talking about who they could go. I definitely, if it was me, I would go defensive side of the ball, depending on who's there, what position. That's all going to play out Thursday night. But what's your take on going receiver early in this draft? Because then without that 4th-round pick, it just bugs me. Without that 4th-round pick, you're only going to get 2 guys. And are they both going to be able to make an impact on defense? Clearly, you got a lot more holes on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no, for sure. if they don't go cornerback, and I think that if you've got a cornerback there, now I like Stingley, so if Gardner or Stingley are there, I would absolutely take them.
Yep.
Obviously, in the most recent mock draft, they weren't, so I took McDuffie, and I like McDuffie, so I don't think that was too big of a reach. But those are, I think, all possibilities. And the thing about Stingley and McDuffie and Gardner is that you can play them right away. Like Tariq Woolen, who you're high on, I don't know that you can play him right away. Mm-hmm. And so I get why you'd want to play pick a defensive player, because that's the area you're just less comfortable with in terms of the state of the unit. Mm-hmm. But the thing I like about a receiver is you always get the choice of putting a receiver on the field. If you grab a defensive lineman, you don't always have that choice.
Good point.
The offense gets to choose for you. And so if you've got a really good 3 defensive lineman set, I would just go 11 personnel every time, right? And I just say, look, you
until
have Jordan
you can
Davis
stop me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that to me is more of a tiebreaker. It sounds really significant. It's not as significant as it sounds, but that to me is a pretty good tiebreaker on some of these questions, is that I would probably take the receiver. And receivers tend to have more of an ability to impact the game, at least historically. And this is the analytics take, right?
No doubt.
Where to me, a receiver is probably the second most important player on the team after the quarterback.
That's fair. That's fair. And how about this factor too, Arif? Look at the money these guys, these premium wideouts are getting paid now. I mean, Christian Kirk ruined the landscape for receivers with what he got paid. And then, you know, you look at the even top end guys, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill making $30 million. I mean, there's a reason why Debo, DK, AJ Brown, they all want that big money. So if you can try to find a impact guy, not a guy you got to develop for 2 or 3 years, but an impact guy right away at that position, especially with the fact that you got Thielen, Osborne, and JJ, he doesn't need to be a number 1 guy, but can still make a huge impact in that 11 or 4 wide out personnel. I think it makes a lot of sense because you can pay him dimes on the dollar. And with, again, how much money these guys are making, you can get 5 years on the cheap for a big home run type of threat like a Jameson Williams. I'm with you. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, given, again, this new landscape that we've seen in the NFL, both from a GM, free agency, money, contract standpoint, and just the X's and O's on the field.
Yeah. And you mentioned Thielen. You got to replace him long term. Might as well.
No doubt. Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Let's talk about some day 2 guys that could be Vikings guys, and then I've got a day 3 question for you that I know you're going to nail. So let's get to some of these day 2 guys that you might like. Who do you think scream, Donatel, O'Connell, Vikings to you?
I don't know when they're going to look at linebacker, given the other, more pressing needs. And again, you got guys like Troy Dye and Chaz Serrata. They don't know what they're getting from those guys. But I love DeMarco Jackson from Appalachian State, another smaller school guy. But watch the second game versus Louisiana. Maybe the best linebacker tape I saw all season. Great downhill thumper. Again, I've preached a lot about you need speed in this new league. He maybe doesn't necessarily give you all the boxes. You can't check them all. But great run tackler, great downhill thumper. I think DeMarco Jackson's not going to go day 2. He'll go day 3. And I just think, in day 3, you're not getting guys that check all the boxes anyways. You want guys that are really good at least at 1 or 2 things that can at least start out on special teams, and maybe you can develop them in at least a role like a first and second down guy. DeMarco Jackson, I like quite a bit. Luke Inman from Central Michigan starting to get maybe a little bit more love and buzz. I've heard his name get thrown out there finally this past week. You bring him in as a 6th offensive lineman. I don't think offensive line, again, is a big pressing need, but we're talking about day 3 guys. Central Michigan, you bring him in as a 6th offensive lineman, and then in year 2, he can play any and all 5 positions. I mean, he's a guy you can build around. Obviously, they think they got their bookends at tackle, so you're looking more so as an interior guy, but I think Luke Inman, just the versatility that it brings you, maybe just a backup Rashad Hill swing guy at the very least. I like him quite a bit, and I got him ranked pretty high. I'm going to fling out a cornerback, Zion Mccollum, 6'2", 200 pounds, 4.33 40. almost 40-inch vert, great 3-cone, 20-yard shot, great combine. And I know he played at that FCS level, but was a ball hawk, man. He's got the combo of size and athletic traits at the next level. I think he's really physical in coverage, and his footwork, his release, I think he could be one of these small school cornerbacks that comes out and makes a big impact. Now, if they go corner in the first round, I'm not sure how long they're going to wait, but it's not like you can't have enough cornerbacks in this league. We just talked about it. Teams are going to throw out 4 or 5 wideouts until you prove that you can stop them. So this team needs more than one just cornerback. And Mccollum, again, that premium size and football intelligence. He was the team captain, loaded with intangibles, 13 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles. I like him a lot, and I would even put him in that third round category, but maybe you can get him because it's a small school name later. No 4th round pick, but later on day 3.
All right, so you answered with like 3 day 3 names. Do you have any day 2 names?
Oh, are we talking day 2? Oh man, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, we can do that too. Are you gonna pay me overtime here? Yeah. Let me call the union. Day 2 guys. I'm looking at, again, we talked about Kyle Hamilton quite a bit. There's still some other safeties that I really like. Daxton Hill, first of all, can play safety, corner, outside, inside at the slot, can play the rover, the ranger, that deep center fielder, can play in the box. I don't know where he's going to go, but if he were to slip in this, early 40s, that's a guy that I would absolutely love the Vikings to look at. I love the linebackers in here. You know how high I am on Troy Anderson, Chad Muma from Wyoming, and Leo Chanel from Wisconsin. 2 different kind of players and styles. But again, I just don't know. As much as I love them, I don't know if the Vikings are going to look that early in day 2 at a linebacker position. So Jalen Pittier from Baylor. In fact, there's like 3 Baylor secondary guys. JT Woods, Bynum. There's a lot of guys from Baylor that had great combines, really good tape, matched the speed and quickness from the combine with physicality on the tape. Jalen Pittier, though, he's another guy with versatility that I really like on day 2. Cam Britt Taylor, you mentioned him. I'm assuming you're down at the Senior Bowl. Maybe I missed that, but I'm assuming you're at in Mobile covering the Senior Bowl.
I had to miss that, actually.
Oh, you missed that one. Okay. But you saw some highlights.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for sure,
Cam Britt Taylor, great Senior Bowl down there. There's actually 2 corners, as you know, from Nebraska, JoJo Doman and Cam Britt. I really like Cam Britt's physicality, just jumps off the tape. I would like, if they don't go corner in the first round, let me ask you this. If they don't go corner in the first round, which everybody's pegging them, if you gun to your head, yeah, they're probably going to go corner. If they don't, who's a day 2, second round? You almost have to. What's the percentage that they're forced? I mean, they're pigeonholed to have to take a corner with that, 44th pick in the second round. You almost have to, don't you?
I mean, if you miss it, yeah, I think that you've got to take a shot at a corner. I just don't know. I mean, it really depends, right? Because you've got Kyler Gordon, right? Who might be there, right?
Again, McCrary. I think we both love McCrary if he's still there.
God, he's fun to watch.
I love him.
I think he's got the shortest arms of anybody.
Why?
That's
Why
been
do you do that
drafted in the first 3 rounds in 5-6 years, something like that. Right?
Kyrie Elam from Florida, complete opposite, long, lanky, almost that Xavier Rhodes type of body.
I like him a lot. I think he might go at the bottom of the first round. But if he doesn't, I certainly think the Vikings should kind of consider him. But that's something to kind of consider. And I think also at some point you have to grab an interior offensive lineman, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean,
what
are we doing with Wyatt Davis? Let's just look at what it is now. Wyatt Davis, Oli Udoh, and then they brought the guy from Miami who seems to be, if you talk to Miami fans, seems to be maybe could be a little bit better than I think he's pegged when you just go off of, okay, well, what are we paying him? What's his pedigree? What's the tape look like? He maybe, what is it, Jesse Davis, I believe his name is?
Yeah,
maybe
they
could end up being the guy.
They also got Chris Reed.
Oh, that's right. Yes, thank you.
From the Colts, too.
Yep.
Actually, most Miami fans I talked to were not fans of Jesse Davis.
Okay.
But the Colts fans I talked to were huge fans of Chris Reed. Either way, they paid Jesse Davis more than they paid Chris Reed. So I think that tells us that the Vikings might like Jesse Davis a little bit more. But I think what you might have been about to say is that with Jesse Davis, I mean, he's playing I think all 5 positions for Miami at some point.
You need one guy like that. Emergency situation, 2 guys are injured that week, and somebody goes down in the game. You need a guy that can just play all 5 positions. Easier said than done, for sure, but I think Jesse Davis could do that for sure. Yeah. Anyways, wheeling back around here, I like you take that. They got to target this interior offensive line at some point as well.
Yeah, and so I don't know kind of who in the second or third round would be interesting to you, right? Because
I don't know who's going to be there. Is Kenyon Green going to be there from Texas A&M? Zion's gone.
I think they stay away from Kenyon Green just for scheme fit reasons, right?
Yep.
Obviously, Zion's going to be gone. Tyler Linderbaum's going to be gone.
Yep.
And then you have to make questions. And this is kind of one of the classes where, based off of what I've been doing with the big board, I've noticed that there's been a little bit more disagreement on the interior offensive lineman in the middle rounds than there usually is.
It's a weird year. Yeah. Cole Strange is like number 2 or 3 for some people.
Yeah.
And then he's, 7 or 8 for some people. Luke Fortner from Kentucky, he's another guy that played almost every interior position, extensive experience. I think 600 snaps, if I remember right. Guard, center, right guard. I think he could be a guy later on that you look at. Dylan Parham. Yep. It's a weird year. It feels like a weird interior offensive lineman year. Doesn't mean that, guys aren't going to hit later on in day 2 and day 3, but it just seems kind of like a goofy year when you get past those top 2, Zion, Linderbaum, and Kenyon Green. It's kind of throw some darts up there, like you always like to say. It's just, who's your flavor? Pick your flavor. Who's your guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, go get your guys.
Go get your guys. All right, one last thing before I let you go. There are some players that are not, the top player in the draft, right?
Yep.
That are just pleasures to watch, absolutely fun to watch, right? And actually, Jordan Davis, who's actually one of the more talented players in the draft, is maybe an example of that. But I think the example that I want to get across what I'm thinking when I say this is George Pickens.
Oh.
I absolutely love watching this dude, right?
Great call.
Right. And I don't know that there's another guy in the draft. He could be 330 pounds. It could be Jordan Davis, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't know that there's another guy in the draft that would win in a fight against George Pickens.
He is a bulldog, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
so in every sense of the word, really, right?
Yeah. And that's why, I brought up Cam Britt Taylor, the corner from Nebraska, same kind of bulldog mentality. I love that. I'll never forget throwing on 2015 tape, Washington cornerback Marcus Peters and his bulldog mentality.
Yeah.
I mean, he's out to get in the head. I mean, I've been watching a lot of Timberwolves.
I mean, you'll fight anybody. It could be the opponents, the teammates, his coaches, anybody.
Right. And you want a guy on your team, defense specifically, that is just after guys every single play. Even if the ball's away from them, every play is getting in their face. And, Jalen Ramsey, obviously, maybe the best to do that right now when we're talking corners, but easy, kind of an easy name to fling out there. But I absolutely love George Pickens. And I think, again, he's just got that mean streak that those are the kind of football players you just want to add. And I'm glad that you said and brought him up, because he is, when you flip on the tape, he's just fun to watch. You think about without the injury, where's he going? And
without the injury, I think that he could be potentially a first rounder.
Potentially. Maybe. Yep. And that's the other point too, is that, if you go wide out in the first round, are you going to be bummed when you get to pick 44 in the second round and look at guys like Pickens maybe there, Sky Moore, completely different type of player. But I mean, there's a lot of wideouts in that second and third round that you can still get later on. Jahan Dotson from Penn State, I don't think he's going to go first round, but a lot of people have him pegged, top 30, top 40 kind of guy. There's a lot of wideouts that I think you would maybe not necessarily kicking yourself, but maybe regret the value of punching the wide receiver like Garrett Wilson, Olave, Drake London, whoever your guy is, and then coming back in the second round going, oh my gosh, we could have waited till the second round or third round even, and look at so many of these impact big guy names that maybe they'll never be true number ones. Pickens, I think, has that ability, but the other guys I mentioned, Sky Moore and some other ones, Calvin Austin III, Velus Jones, he's pretty old. He's probably completely crossed off the board for Kwesi. But I just think, again, the draft has so much to do. All we do is about value. And that's why we talk about trading down, getting value. When can you get another position later on? And I just think wideout, if you punch it at 12, you may end up regretting it come back in round 2, because there's still a lot of big impact guys, even if they're only wide receiver 2s or 3s, those kind of guys. You still need those guys in the NFL the way the pass happy landscape is.
So my question to you is, let's forget about value or who should draft who or where they're going to go. There's a bunch of ways players can be fun, right? Like Scooby Wright was never going to be drafted high.
Man,
absolutely
Arizona,
fun to watch, right?
Oh,
yeah,
how
exactly.
fun was that?
Absolutely fun to watch, right? And you obviously, there's some great players that they play the position like it's meant to be played. Like Andrew Luck, obviously, absolutely fun to watch, right? He was a great quarterback to watch. In the same way, Malik Willis from this year, or actually even more so, someone like Lamar Jackson when he was coming out, fun to watch guys that can be fun for so many different reasons, right? Nakobe Dean this year might be a good example of that. But, Will Fuller, Kadarius Toney, Percy Harvin, like highlight reels.
Kadarius Toney, man. Great call. I'm glad you brought him up. Yes.
Right. Tavon Austin is maybe one of my favorite college players to ever watch, right? All kinds of players that are just fun to watch. So name a guy that's not going to go in the first 2 rounds that is just your favorite to watch?
Man, great question. Here's just probably a day 3 guy, maybe a position the Vikings will target on that day, 4th, 5th round, 6'7", 260, came out of Virginia. He's a tight end. He spent the first 4 years of his career as a blocking tight end, and all of a sudden, by the way, from Oklahoma State, and all of a sudden he transfers to Virginia. Jelani Woods, I think, was so fun to watch on tape because nobody expected this. They're like, wait a minute, that's the same guy that we were putting in line and blocking every play. This guy is a freak athletically, great combine, great 40 time. Again, just an athletic specimen. I think he's a guy that would be fun. Oh, first of all, he is fun to watch on tape, but he would be a great pick for somebody like the Vikings who need that tight end too and could develop him finally now that he's just scratching the surface all of a sudden as a pass-catching tight end. Again, mismatches, you need him. You can flanker him out wide. 6'7", 260, great 40 time. I think he was a lot of fun to watch on tape now that Virginia finally used him, unlike they did at Oklahoma State. Can I get one from you? I know you got a lot of them. Can I get one from you?
I did put a lot out there. Right?
Can I ask that? Am I allowed to do that?
No, you're not. But let's see if I can. Okay. Well, if we're talking highlights from other years, right? Not this year. Reed Blankenship's on my list, right? I think that he was absolutely fun to watch.
Yes.
This last year, not so much, right? And he slowed down. I think it was injuries. And so he had to transition from like a single high safety to a box safety. Super smart player, incredible intangibles, and unfortunately had a lot of athleticism. I don't know if he's ever going to recover that, but he was a ton of fun to watch. I liked him a lot.
He's
obviously punt god, Matt Araiza. I mean, the guy.
How fun is that?
Yeah, the guy just does not care about hang time or touchbacks.
Does that not sum up this draft class? Like, it's just such a weird draft class this year. Maybe not as strong, but then you got other areas like Matt Araiza, the punter. That's just like, this is like the best punting prospect we've seen in I don't know how long. I mean, it's just a fun. Every year's different. They got, again, unique little fingerprint. They're all a little different, but this one is specifically. I'm just so interested to know 4 years from now, when we look back, what this draft class is going to be known for.
Yeah, it's gonna be wild, right? Yes. I didn't get a chance to watch this guy a ton. I'm interested in him. It's Zion McCollum's twin, Tristan McCollum, a safety instead of a cornerback.
Wow,
kind of like a Devin McCourty, Justin.
Wow,
yeah. And that intrigues me because he was not invited to the combine, but he had remarkable testing numbers at the pro day for Sam Houston State. So that I think is going to be kind of interesting to kind of break down and figure out and figure out kind of what's going on there. Why was the cornerback invited but not the safety?
Right.
Zach Tom, pretty interesting guy. He's like a really good tester.
A good name.
He had the lowest blown block rate according to Sports Info Solutions, but he just does not scream an NFL type, which is why he's going pretty late, it looks like. And so that is I thought he was fun to watch, but it doesn't feel like he's going to succeed. I want him to. So
I think when you get in that day 3, you're looking again for those role player guys. They're not going to check all the boxes. We're long gone. Those guys are all gone at this point. But what are the guys? Who are the guys that really excel in one or two things that I can find a role for this guy? Again, we always, the headache of, Norv Turner, you're not using Cordero Patterson right. You got to figure out, good coaches figure out how to maximize the talent. I like Kyle Phillips from UCLA. He's so
fun.
He's got that. Yeah, I mean, he's got that Hunter Renfrow. Again, was he going to be a number 1? Well, I don't know. Number 2, probably not. But Hunter Renfrow style of play inside at UCLA. Caught a ton of balls. Great route runner. Slippery after the catch. He's a guy that I think I got rated just outside my top 100, maybe 98, 90, somewhere in there. And I just think, again, receivers. I think you mentioned it. Edge, loaded at edge this year. There's a couple other positions, but wideout, man, if you take one at 12, are you going to be kicking yourself later, especially knowing you're already pretty set at the top with Thielen and JJ and Osborne, that maybe you should have went should have went another position. Obviously, we're talking about defensive side of the ball now.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I think that's I think doubled the. I asked Luke how long he could go for.
My wife's going to kill me.
Long. Yeah. Tell her I said hi, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. She misses you.
I miss her too. I'd rather hang out with her than you.
I don't blame you. In fact, a lot of my friends and family say that. Yeah, it's the same opinion. Yeah. No, I'm doing fine. I'm great. Yeah. Hide the pain, Luke. Hide the pain.
But yeah, I mean, you can plug your mediocre podcast.
Super average, dude.
And anything else you want to do, average. Go for it, man. What have you got to say?
Yeah, again, me and Reggie Wilson, sports anchor for KARE 11, just started this new podcast from the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network called Superior Sports Talk, Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes. Check them out again on the Locked On Podcast Network. That's all I got. Twitter, Luke _Spinman. When it's not suspended, you never know what you're going to get.
Is it Luke _Spinman or is it Luke Spinman?
Well, Luke Spinman's the OG. Luke _Spinman's the OG. And that did take a little hiatus break for a little bit. It got suspended, but she's back. So as long as I don't do anything goofy like make some, random highlight tapes and get copyright flags for music I shouldn't be using, that will be the go-to. That was always the first initial account I had. But if anything happens, if I go missing for a little bit, do check out the backup account at Luke _Spinman NFL.
I love it. That's great, man. Luke's back. I'm so happy to have him on.
Dude, so great to talk to you, man. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's been great.
You're killing it. You're crushing it at the Athletic. Even though I was gone for a little bit, always kept up with your stuff. Heard you in the press conferences at TCO and Egan. I turned to my wife. I go, hey, I know that guy. Kind of a big deal. I don't want to brag about it. Kind of a big deal. But keep up the great work, man. It's so great to be back. So great to talk not just Vikings, but the NFL draft with you. And hopefully we can talk again real soon.
All right. Peace out, man.
All right. Let's get to the mailbag. And the first question is from Evo. Evo asks, the cornerback would make the most sense with our pick at 12 because of the dire need. But if Stingley and Sauce are off the board, what do y'all think about trying to recreate a 3 deep?
Yeah, so we answered this a little bit with the Luke Inman interview about kind of the advantages of having another wide receiver. Obviously, one of the things you have to pay attention to is the fact that Adam Thielen is getting a little bit older, and so you need to find a long-term replacement, and finding a first-round quality receiver for that seems like a good idea. Plus, the thing I like about Jameson Williams specifically, this could also be kind of true for Garrett Wilson, is that they add an element of speed that's not really in the Vikings offense. It's not as if, Adam Thielen or Justin Jefferson are bad deep receivers, but having an element of speed that might remind you a little bit of Tyreek Hill or kind of what impact he has on the defense will change your options and make it a little bit easier for you to do stuff like, run the ball or create intermediate options for Jefferson or what have you, and create better big play options, even if that player is specifically not catching the ball in a particular play. So I like those players in particular to do that. I don't know if, for example, Drake London does the same thing, but I think that's something to kind of keep in mind. The important thing, I think, is that it is a bit of a deep cornerback draft class, so you can kind of go after, say, Tariq Woolen in rounds 2 through 4. You can go after Roger McCreary and some of the other guys that Luke and I talked about that are potential options on day 2 that you might be able to get starting sooner or later. And you're not really rushing to get that cornerback on the field because you've got Patrick Peterson, Cameron Dancer, Chandon Sullivan. Now, none of those players are going to be the top player at their position this year, but they're going to help, plug some holes while you figure out kind of what's best for your team. So I don't think it's a problem to do that. It's obviously not the most likely direction the Vikings are going to go into, but I would say that I wouldn't rule it out either. It wouldn't shock me if the Vikings drafted a receiver here, especially if they've got, Jameson Williams a tier above Garrett Wilson or vice versa. So that's definitely in the cards, and they could be the first one to take a receiver off the board, given how the draft is playing out. So, yeah, I'd keep that in mind. I just don't know that that's the most likely scenario.
Let's go to a question from John Belk, who asks, which players would you be willing to trade up for, and what would you be willing to give up for them? Conversely, what's the minimum you'd accept to trade down to a spot with a good chance of getting either McDuffie or Booth or Lindenbaum?
Yeah, and one other player I'd add to that second question is maybe Zion Johnson. He's such an excellent guard. I think he does a really good job. So to answer the first question, what players I'd be willing to trade up for, I think when you're trading up, you're both fulfilling a need and finding a player that is in a different tier than the other players at his position. So you need to find a player that you're not going to get a roughly equivalent performance from. And I think those players exist at positions of need for the Vikings. I think Ahmad Gardner or Sauce Gardner is a really good example of one of those players. That's something that I think would matter. And then I think that Kyle Hamilton's a special player. You heard the interview with Luke. He is Hamilton ranked as his number 1 player in the draft. So obviously he would, trade up for Hamilton. And I think that if he was in striking distance, I wouldn't begrudge the Vikings for doing that. We talked about what mechanically that would look like for the Vikings if they did that. So I would say that those are 2 players I would be willing to do it for. I don't know that I do it for any of the edge rushers. We talked about how they don't strike me as the best edge rusher in a class in a typical year. The Vikings do need offensive linemen, but I wouldn't do it for a guard. And so I think it's really those 2 players that I'd isolate. Maybe Stingley if you don't have to go up that many spots in the draft, because I do think there's a separation between Stingley and that next group, which leads me to the second part of that question, McDuffie, Booth. I would also add Kaiir Elam maybe to that group. And, if like the medicals check out for Booth, or if you're not too worried about the measurables for McDuffie, certainly that's an option. If it's just one spot, if you're trading down one spot, kind of like what the Vikings did with Cleveland multiple years.
to varying success with Cleveland.
From 3 to 4 and from, 8 to 9, I want to say. I would say Cleveland traded up a spot with a 4th-round pick in 2012 when they tried to draft Trent Richardson. The Vikings, stole Matt Khalil in that draft. It was a win-win all around. So I'd say probably a 5th. The issue here is that the Texans do have some overlapping needs with the Vikings, in that the Texans need every position because they're a bad team. But because you're picking amongst a tier of players, there's probably not an enormous amount of separation, again, if the medicals are okay, between McDuffie, Booth, and Elam, or between, say, Lindenbaum and Zion Johnson. And I would probably prefer Lindenbaum in that scenario. And so the Texans could draft an interior offensive lineman, leave the Vikings at the other one, and keep them happy, or the same thing with a cornerback. So I'd certainly move down a spot, grab a 5th, and do that. If it's to trade down maybe a couple of spots, obviously it depends on how far down. At that point, you're talking about a 3rd-round pick, maybe if it's not too many spots, a 4th-round pick. But certainly you have to kind of figure out what the needs are for some of those other people that are a little bit between you and them. So like Baltimore, for example, a lot of people have them drafting, say Jordan Davis. That's not a huge need for the Vikings, so you can kind of give that one up. There's a couple of other spots. Baltimore might draft a corner, so you have to be careful. Philadelphia can use a lot of different players. The Athletic just did a beat writer mock draft, which by the time most of you are listening to this will already have been published. So I can just say this now. Philadelphia traded up for a corner. So we know that Philadelphia needs a corner, just because their beat writers seem to think that it was worth trading up for. So I wouldn't trade down too far because you've got 13, 14, 15 where they could all justify drafting a corner, and maybe that's what you want. Also, 13 and 15, you could justify drafting an interior offensive lineman. So I would only trade down a little bit, maybe grab a 3rd or a 4th, but because there's a bunch of players at that same tier, I'd certainly entertain that issue if none of those players went before where the Vikings are picking.
Yeah, and it's not like especially when the Eagles in particular, it's not like they are low on draft picks or anything this year.
Yeah.
They're spoiled for having more than a few. If we're going to get demonetized, we might as well have the Humpty Dance in the background for it. So we're going to go with this and go over to Christopher Wiley, who asks, when you control for medical concerns and maybe interviews, do the consensus board sleepers from previous years outperform their draft positions?
Yeah, steals and reaches is an interesting conversation, and I've been talking to a couple of analytics folks about this, and what we have mostly discovered is that steals somewhat outperform their draft slot. That it's not very significant. What's really more important is that reaches underperform the draft slot much more often and much more significantly. You do have exceptions, like Colton Miller for the Raiders is a good exception, although it took him a few years before he was actually, a quality player for them. A better example might be also with the Raiders, Clelin Ferrell, who not only did not perform up to a 4th overall spot, but I don't even think has performed up to the grade that he was given on the consensus board, which I think was around 22, something like that. So reaches tend to underperform a little bit more often, and I think that's because in order for a player to be picked too high, it only takes one team to say yes to that, whereas it takes 32 teams to let a player fall, and that's a lot more information that you can trust from 32 different groups of evaluators that, for whatever reason, believe that a player will fall. So, in some instances, again, to go with the Raiders, with Maurice Hurst, that was a medical concern with his heart. And so you don't want to say that, the teams had a bunch of information about how good or bad a player he was. It's like a Jesse Williams situation with his knee or something along those lines. But in a non-medical situation, when a player falls and you're kind of not sure why, often that player is just not as good as people seem to think. I remember, say, Paul Dawson from TCU fell quite a bit. That's a pretty good example of a player falling, and everyone was a little bit confused, but it turned out not to matter. I think Dalvin Cook was a steal by the consensus board, and he, as much as I think the Vikings probably shouldn't pick a running back at that spot, he has outperformed his draft slot. He's been a good running back. He's been better than some running backs picked ahead of him, like, Leonard Fournette. So, generally speaking, it is a slight advantage to grab a steal by the consensus board. It is not as big of an advantage as it looks, historically speaking. And then it's really the reaches that you have to watch out for. That's kind of the bigger spot. I'm actually thinking about putting out 2 sets of post-draft grades. One that doesn't reward steals that often, and one and punishes reaches a little bit more, and one that's kind of like the classic grading system and trying to compare them against each other.
You will find a way to milk the consensus board for all it's worth.
It makes me more money than anything else I write all year.
This is your baby.
Yeah.
R. Menson asks, for the Rick Spielman Memorial Draft Strategy Corner, who are some... Rick Spielman has a TikTok. The fact I didn't know that...
Awful. I shared it with the Discord. I heard about it because I think it was Luke Braun? No, somebody in that chat shared it. Luke Inman, actually. I think Luke. It was a Luke.
It was one of the Lukes.
Just blame a Luke.
Yeah.
Shared it with me in a Twitter group chat. Awful cursed content. It's not very good. The very first video he posts, he just gets cut off at the 3-minute mark, and he doesn't post like a follow-up video that finishes it.
I like to think that he just assumes that that's still available somewhere.
Yeah, it's like it would be beautiful if it wasn't just so nothing burger. Anyway,
so for the Rick Spielman Memorial Draft Strategy Corner, who are some reasonable players to target if the Vikings trade back into the first round because one of the elite corners isn't available at 12? What teams might be interested in trading up to 12?
Yeah, so I covered a couple of those players. Andrew Booth, Kyer Elam, he's got a little bit of size, so he's interesting. And, of course, Trent McDuffie's a little bit on the other side of the spectrum in terms of what he's able to do and kind of what measurables he brings to bear. And I mentioned Zion Johnson and Tyler Linderbaum as targets as well. The other guard that a lot of people are talking about in the first round is Kenyon Green. I think he's a very good guard. I think it's kind of a system fit thing again. I don't think he's necessarily a great fit for the zone scheme that the Vikings run, and especially the super athletic players that they tend to play with. Now, if they wanted an edge rusher or a receiver, maybe they'll trade down and they kind of like some of what some of these other receivers have to offer once you get past that top three of Drake London, Jamison Williams, and Garrett Wilson. Maybe they really like Jahan Dotson from Penn State. Maybe they really like the Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Burks, that's kind of one where you have to project that he plays better than his testing. Or maybe, they'll say, hey, Malik Willis is going to fall. We need a quarterback in the future, and he needs to sit. Maybe they go after Malik Willis. In my most recent version of the big board, Malik Willis went from QB2 to QB1. So anything is on the table there. And then one player that's kind of interesting is maybe Trevor Penning. He's largely talked about as a tackle. He had some of the best testing at the combine, but you could play him at guard. Like, I don't think that there's anything, kind of like Ezra Cleveland. I don't think there's anything preventing that from happening. One other player that could be worth targeting is the other player from Washington, Kyler Gordon, another cornerback. So those are all players. The issue is more teams, per a lot of the national reporters right now, are attempting to trade down than there are teams that are willing to trade up. So I don't know that you'll find a team that's willing to do that. Now, obviously, we mentioned the Eagles trading up in one of the beat writer mock drafts. They traded up ahead of the Vikings. I don't know that they would wait all the way to 12 to trade with the Vikings, but that is a possibility. They would probably still they're not going to trade both first-round picks for pick 12, but you could trade pick 18 and something else for pick 12. I don't know anybody else that's going to trade up. Pittsburgh almost never trades up, but they do have a new general manager, so they might if they really think that they're at risk of losing a quarterback. So that's somebody that you could envision doing that. Green Bay might, for the first time maybe ever, draft a receiver in the first round, and if they...
I think the last one they had, because it was said during that famous Pat McAfee break where the guy on the show was a gigantic Packers fan, and he lost his mind because he was pretending to be Mel Kiper. He was being fake Mel Kiper, and he lost his mind over it. But he knew the exact player. I think it's been since 2007 or something like that. I realize I'm on a podcast and I should know this.
A guy who might have been teammates with Donald Driver?
At that.
Because, Jennings, I think, was a second-rounder. I know Jordy Nelson was a high second-rounder, but a second-rounder. Devonta Adams was a second-rounder, obviously, so...
If I'm literally pulling up the history of Packers draft picks now. And the last wide receiver taken by the Packers... Javon Walker, 2002.
Javon Walker. How'd that go?
Well, he went to the Pro Bowl in 2004.
Good for him.
He attempted to start I love this. I pulled up his Wikipedia. Attempted to start a clothing company called Jaywalk.
Look. Get in where you fit in.
Yep.
I imagine he had difficulty finding a market.
He should have just slowly introduced body pillow, throw pillows.
Yeah.
Then you get the shower curtain, and then you get you get the tapestry, all that.
There is a non-zero chance that our threadless store is a more successful clothing store than Jaywalk.
Yeah, there's a very decent chance of that actually. We'll move on to another question from Armenson, who asks, for James and Arif's Minnesota Nice Corner, what is one nice thing that each of you can say about Luke or his podcast?
Well, we did cover that when Luke Braun's father wrote in asking about...
Things you didn't like about him.
Things we didn't like about Luke. And I started with his face. And I'm gonna stay there. I think that it is wonderful that Luke can get across everything you need to know about him with his very earnest face that I hate.
That you hate. I was gonna go with his episodes are short.
Yeah, gotta love that.
Damn near got him to spit beer at the computer. Damn near. Oh, Luke, you know I like you. Jay Olson asks, if a top wide receiver prospect is still available after the first few picks, would it be worth trading Thielen to get one?
So I assume it's trading Thielen along with number 12 because Thielen himself is not worth a first-round pick and probably not worth a second-round pick at his age and production level. So if you traded number 12 and Thielen and moved up, I would not suggest a receiver because it very much seems like it is difficult to separate the top three receivers right now, especially the top two receivers. It seems like every time I update the consensus board, between Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams, one of them moves to number 1, one of them moves to number 2, and they kind of switch places. And then Drake London is kind of there, and he's pretty close to all of them too. And I would consider them all probably in the same tier. So I don't know that there is a top receiver in the draft that is like that. There's not like a Mike Evans type receiver that feels like that they're separating themselves from the rest of that class, or Julio or AJ Green, that feel like they're such a tier above. This receiver class I think is very good, but I don't think it's very top heavy. So I wouldn't really do that. Now, if a good receiver prospect is falling and to the bottom of the first round, like let's say Jameson Williams, for whatever reason, maybe teams are scared by the ACL injury, which by all accounts he's recovering ahead of schedule, but like his agent is the one telling us this. So, but if Jameson Williams is falling to like 25 or whatever, Green Bay picks at 28, Kansas City picks at 29 and 30, and you want to snipe them, maybe trade with Dallas, or who also need a receiver, so maybe Arizona, I don't know. But if you need to get ahead of like Dallas, Buffalo, Tampa Bay, Green Bay, Kansas City, all of whom might need a receiver, and you want to get Jameson Williams, you could trade Thielen, maybe the number 46 pick, and probably another mid or late round pick. And I absolutely would love to pick whoever is falling among those top 3 receivers to replace Thielen long term, which sucks, right? Because Thielen's like a Minnesota guy. He's been here forever. He just restructured his contract, but restructuring your contract makes you a better asset. Yeah. So it improves his trade value too. And hey, if Thielen is restructuring his contract to help Minnesota, what better way to help Minnesota than to secure a spot for the next star?
Than to help Minnesota on your way out.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine anything nicer than that.
Yeah, between that and making sure to turn the crock pot off before you leave, that's about right. Let's go to...
bring the Tupperware back. Then.
Bring the Tupperware back. You know what? I could see him going through COVID protocol in order to get into the building, in order to... Ed Donatello asks, now that Elon Musk owns Twitter, can we finally speak openly about the superiority of Sam Howell without fear of censorship by the leftist elite?
Oh my God. All right. So, one of my favorite follows on Twitter, Victoria, whose Twitter handle is @dirtbagqueer. That's just what it is.
Yep.
Just started a rumor based off of a zone coverage post about why Sam Howell would be a good pick. Just started a rumor that the Vikings would pick Sam Howell. And it is like gained an unusual amount of steam. And I will never forgive her for it.
So that's just kind of where we're at?
Yep.
All right.
That's my answer.
Luke Braun has written in.
Great.
And says, under mysterious circumstances, the 2022 NFL draft class suddenly vanishes without a trace. To keep the sci-fi balance intact, Elon Musk figures out time travel, but only uses it to bring back old Vikings from the year they were drafted. This creates a new draft comprised of only players the Vikings picked from the year they were drafted. Example, the 1967 version of Alan Page walks out of the time machine, as well as the 1963 version of Bobby Bell. Technically, Vikings picks also count, but not free agent signings or UDFAs. The draft order remains the same, and the league agrees that this group of freshly time-traveled Vikings will now be the draft pool. What does the top of this draft look like? Who would the Vikings pick at 12? Can we ignore the possible looping effects of a young Carl Eller meeting new Carl Eller, and so on? Basically, he's creating a version of Tenet, I think.
Yeah, sure. So that gives you Fran Tarkenton, it gives you Alan Page, it gives you Randy Moss, of course, Randall McDaniel.
We also have certainly not just Randy Moss, but also Chris Carter. No, Chris Carter was not a Vikings pick.
No, he was a Philadelphia
that was Philadelphia. That's right. He had his issues in Philadelphia and ended up in Minnesota.
Yeah. You could get Matt Burke, which would lead to probably young Matt Burke endorsing old Matt Burke for governor. So
if you want that on your hands,
right? If that's a good world for you, then he goes number 1. Bully for you guys. Ed White, who I believe was a defensive tackle for much of college. I wrote a piece on him way back. Adrian Peterson, obviously. Kevin Williams. Bobby Bell, obviously the one that got away, but he is a draft pick, right? So that does count. I would say the top of that board, just because of how bad the quarterback class is probably Fran Tarkenton, which, he's probably not as good in the current era. But, like, you're comparing him to, like, Malik Willis this year.
He still gets picked up by the Steelers, let's be honest.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's fine. You're fine. But, yeah, the top of the class is probably Randy Moss. The weed thing, which let's assume they have all the same red flags that they had coming out, clearly not an issue now. Like, it just wouldn't be, right? Like, oh, wow, you got kicked out of Florida State for what again? Like, okay, maybe he didn't get into Notre Dame because he fought some kids in Virginia. But they called him what? Okay, well, we're fine. Like, it's just a different environment. So I think Randy Moss probably goes, like, in the top 5. But, like, that's kind of where you're at. And then obviously the draft class falls off pretty substantially, but you're still getting, like, maybe around pick 20, somebody like Matt Blair, right? Which is interesting. Like, you could, in theory, argue that Brad Johnson is worth a second-round pick, or maybe a first-round pick at quarterback, because you know what his career trajectory is going to be. You've got Adrian Peterson, who's obviously he's going to go probably in the first round.
He's going to go early, but when he was first coming into the draft, he had just recovered from a broken collarbone.
Yeah, and he's not a pass catcher, and he doesn't pass protect, and those things just matter more now. I still think he's clearly a first-round running back, especially like in this class where it's like Kenneth Walker.
He'd still be ridiculously successful, I feel.
Yeah, but it's not. You're asking for a Derrick Henry. Again, Derrick Henry's probably a better pass catcher, but that's kind of what you're looking at. I would say Randy Moss is probably stacked atop your board, even if Fran Tarkenton might go earlier. I'd say Alan Page is maybe up there. The issue is, like, the nature of the question is that you're taking Alan Page at what his, like, college weight was, which is just lighter than it is right now. Like, I think he was 235 in college. He was 245 for a good chunk of his time at the Vikings. He's a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, what are you doing? So that would be tough. The thing is, Bobby Bell probably goes pretty high because his size is pretty good for a modern linebacker, and he could do everything. He could play kind of like a Tampa 2 Mike safety, like a Shaq Thompson, Jeremy Chin kind of guy, or he could rush off the edge, or he could play a classic linebacker. So he probably goes pretty high. He might be like on par with like your Devin Lloyd this year, right? There's that. Chris Dolman, I think, would still go high. Everson probably goes a little bit higher because of the importance of athletic testing now.
That'd be an interesting interview for the Combine.
Yeah. Well, it's just when he's coming out, right? They'd just be like, well, why'd you get banned from USC parties? He's like,
Why does anyone get banned from USC parties? Don't talk to me about that. Talk to Reggie Bush about that. Don't talk to me about that.
So, yeah, that's probably where it is. At pick 12, you're probably looking at maybe Ed White. Oh, you know who I forgot? Dante Culpepper. He probably goes first.
Ooh, Culpepper.
He probably goes first overall.
Yeah,
his tools.
that's...
Yeah, and how much they value mobility now. And he probably goes first overall. I can't believe I forgot him. Because I was thinking about Cunningham, who wasn't, right? Yeah, so Culpepper probably goes first. Fran Tarkenton probably goes top 5. So at 12, you're probably thinking about maybe a Dolman, maybe a McDaniel, maybe. And I would say... And maybe Bobby Bell. And I would say out of that group, the best player might actually be Bobby Bell, as much as I hate saying that. But I think the guy you might pick might be Randall McDaniel. Stephon Diggs is in this draft, but it's when he's coming out, right? So you probably still...
Yeah, he basically started as almost like a practice squad person, so it wasn't like...
Well, if we kind of assume the trajectory, he's probably a first-round player.
Corey Stringer would be interesting, too, considering linemen.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's given kind of their profile coming out, that's probably where you're at. I think Bryant McKinney would probably fall a little bit because the size is no longer as important. I would think around 12, you're probably thinking about, and Adrian Peterson's probably falling around here, too, but you don't need him with Dalvin Cook. I would think that you might pick Dolman or McDaniel.
Can you imagine being in a situation where your backfield was starting Dalvin Cook and your number 2 running back was Adrian Peterson?
Yeah, it's almost like Chester Taylor would be your starting running back. Sorry.
Let's go to JAT1315, who asks, for Arif's mailbag corner, who would be able to physically fill a mailbag faster, you or Luke? Now, the question is whether or not this is like items you're putting into a bag, or if this is like you physically inside of a bag.
If physically inside a bag, it'd be Luke. Stuffing a mailbag full of like mail or paper or questions or whatever, probably me.
Yeah. Skull Pinion asks, will there be an actual spring this year? I'll answer this one. Seeing as how Grand Forks and the surrounding areas are going through either the third or the fourth of the Egyptian curses, after the several feet of rain, several feet of snow, and now the closing of bridges, we're just waiting for locusts at this point as the next logical season. No, we are not actually going to get a spring. We're just going to go straight to fall. It'll be interesting. I look forward to seeing how they do it. Kyle Slaby asks, who is Kyle Sloter and why are so many people in the Discord talking about a non-Viking so much?
Yeah, I guess he got cut from 25 different teams or something like that.
I heard that too. They made a big deal about the fact that he played for 25 different teams. Did you know that he played for 25? Well, signed. He was signed by.
He at some point was paid by 25 different teams, I guess.
Yeah, he was on the what was the name of the quarterback that was supposed to start in Seattle, and then they drafted Russell Wilson, and that was the end of that.
Matt Flynn.
He's on that Matt Flynn diet.
Yeah.
But anything after that, I mean, he kicked as I even said in the Discord, he kicked the door open for all sorts of successful backup quarterbacks to come in for the Vikings, such as Case Cookus, such as Sean Mannion. People who, well, I mean, Cookus doesn't have a job in the NFL at the moment. Mannion does. Yeah, so Mannion's clearly a better quarterback, as is shown by the fact that he is signed, and Sloter is not. I feel so wrong saying that sentence.
Sean Mannion, the superior quarterback.
There's something for out of context. Also from Kyle Slaby. After a week of delicious Hawaiian restaurants, I am finding the prospect of making our staple weekly dinners a chore. But my wallet and waistline say I should avoid going out to eat. What tips do you have for making the transition between vacation eating and mundane weekly dinners?
I would say probably avoid the kinds of foods you ate in Hawaii in terms of what you're trying to cook, because that will only remind you of what you're missing. There's a bunch of really simple food that you can make instead. I would say, I don't know, maybe a slow cooker recipe. That seems to be our thing. Delicious, easy, cheap. You can just do that. But on top of that, I would probably just veer away from that type of food. Maybe, try your hand at making Italian food. That tends to be Italian-American food tends to be pretty simple. So that's what I would do, is just kind of make it so that you don't have to think that much about food, and also that you don't remind yourself of what you're missing.
Yeah. And the fact that you live in Wisconsin and not in Hawaii.
Yeah.
You didn't take our advice. You didn't find a way to make the Hawaiian people love you so much that you just got
you should have listened to the podcast.
Yeah, that's what clearly, that's what he should have done. Damian Barrett asks, as you're no doubt aware, Irish rugby star Mac Hansen,
of course,
recently got we're big, long-time listeners now.
Yeah.
Mac Hansen
Episode 3
fans.
at least.
Irish rugby star Mac Hansen recently got a tattoo of a teammate's face on his leg. Who on the pod is most likely to get some ink of the other one? And how much in Patreon dollars will it cost us? Well, the only one of us that has any tattoo at all, and I'm including us in more of a royal sense, is Dusty.
In the Norse Code Fantasy League sense of us.
Norse Code Fantasy sense, in that when one of us has a tattoo, all of us have a tattoo. Dusty is the one that has it. So, as a result, I'm going to immediately nominate Dusty for this. And, I don't know where it on his leg, that seems pretty low. That seems like pretty low rent, like, district, though. If he's going to get something
if it was a tattoo of us, you'd prefer it to be in a more prime location?
I feel like Tosh should have to see that anytime Dusty takes his shirt off.
Well, so I was going to ask, do you know whether or not Dusty has a tramp stamp?
I know Dusty has a few tattoos, and I don't believe tramp stamp is one of them. But that doesn't mean that we can't have the wreath going along along tailbone, and then the actual like a wreath like logo in there. Or
that's good.
Yeah, I think that works.
Tasteful, obviously.
Incredibly tasteful. It's so tasteful that we put it on a tapestry.
Right.
So that immediately means that it's tasteful. Yeah, this works.
Very wholesome.
That is actually what North Code stands for now, is wholesome content.
Yeah.
Let me take a sip of my beer here. Euleron asks, the Seahawks have a history of making bewildering picks in the first round of the draft. Assuming they stay at 9 overall, which player in this class is the ceiling on just how ridiculous they could realistically be? Like, the obvious answer here is Punter God, right?
Oh, yeah. That's the most chaotic, most Seahawky thing I think that you could do here. I think that makes a lot of sense.
They could also never have to worry about punting for 20 years.
They love that. The thing is, they are pretty committed to this Dixon guy, which is too bad for them. I'm looking down the list, and I'm trying to find somebody ranked like in the 50s or 60s that feels like the Seahawks would reach for them a lot. Obviously, there's a quarterback, right? Like Sam Howell would be an example of that. I think actually the funniest answer would be Troy Anderson. They don't need to draft a linebacker, right? Because they just drafted one, and they seem pretty high on the guy. But that seems funny to me. He is a super athlete. He had a pretty bad game against NDSU. That seems right. That this super athlete that's not actually that good at football would be 9 overall at a position that doesn't matter all that much, despite being ranked 74th on the consensus board.
Euleron also asks, match this class's draft prospects to the following bee races available for purchase at Man Lake Bee Supplies.
Oh my God!
So your first possible choice is the Carniolan. Sure.
All right. Well, so first, before I answer this question, I don't believe that there are fundamental behavioral differences or trait differences between these different bee breeds. I just don't. That's just not something I do. But if we are to go by the packaging on the box, which is snake oil, right? Because they are just trying to sell you bees. They'll lie about what these bees are. If we'll go, so the Carniolan is more likely to forage on cool, wet days than other bees. They're quick to brood up when nectar is available. They're good comb builders. They're excellent honey producers. So functionally, a very hardy, productive kind of bee. That sounds like a CJ Ham kind of bee to me, right? So very, very loyal, and kind of nose to the grindstone kind of description of a bee that may or may not reflect the qualities of an entire breed of bees.
So the second option we have is the Southern Italian.
All right. So again, the description on the website argues that the Southern Italian are one of the gentlest and most docile of the bee subspecies. They readily build combs. They readily enter supers, or super hives. They're wonderful foragers. They have a less tendency to swarm than other subspecies. They have strong cleaning behaviors. So my understanding of this is a bee that tends to live on an island in terms of what they do. So maybe like a man coverage corner or a receiver that draws a bunch of attention, something along those lines. And I think that when you're looking at understated leadership, gentle and docile, right, is the way that they describe it, but readily builds a comb, readily enters supers, first into the fray, right, but on an island, I would say that's probably Patrick Peterson.
Well, the next one is Saskatraz.
That is, all of these are made up, but that's super made up. All right.
So the Saskatraz.
Good wintering ability, excellent honey production, selected for increased varroa tolerance and resistance to brood diseases, showed increased hygienic behavior, and gentle. So we're looking for somebody who is injury resistant, which is a rarity on the Vikings. They generally have good production. They're clean. There's no off-the-field worries. They've got...
Probably boring to a fault, really.
Yeah, I would say that. That's exactly what I would say. And certainly not known for their aggressiveness, right? That's Kirk Cousins. You knew which direction I was going.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
And finally, we have the purebred Russian.
Jeez. All right, so the description of this one, more resistant to varroa, so mostly injury resistant, highly resistant to tracheal mites, so that can't be Daniil Hunter, right, because of the neck. They rear their brood during times of pollen availability. maybe fecund. I don't know. I don't know what on the field trait that would translate to. Maybe, I would say clutch. How about that? Clutch.
Clutch. Let's go with clutch.
And they have a low likelihood of robbing, which to me sounds like a Russian bee wrote this.
It does sound like this is the sort of information that's coming out from the Russian bee authorities.
Right. Which again, that's not a racial characteristic. I mean,
No.
every cultural institution produces unique products, right? So that's something that you
History is written by the winners.
Right, exactly. In this case, a purebred Russian. Shipped from Kentucky, though. Okay, so a clutch Vikings player that is injury resistant, that doesn't turn the ball over or grab a lot of turnovers. That is a lot of things that don't describe most Vikings players. That one's tough. That's definitely not Dalvin Cook for the injury and turnover reason. Hey, Adam Thielen's pretty clutch, though.
Thielen, I was going to say either Thielen or Harrison Smith at that point, maybe.
But Thielen's racked up some injuries recently. Is the issue.
has.
And this one is avoids turnover, so I don't know about Harrison Smith either. What kind of clutch player avoids turnovers and is somewhat resistant to injury? Now, if Stephon Diggs was still on the roster.
Stephon Diggs would have worked. Also, if Kyle Rudolph was on the roster.
Yeah, he's clutch. He's not, like, good.
No, but you know.
Clutch, certainly.
When I think of Kyle Rudolph, I think of the quote-unquote push-off in New Orleans.
Right, yeah, this is the first thing I thought of. Yeah. So there's that. Not Dalvin Cook. Certainly not. Dalvin Cook's not clutch. Certainly not injury resistant. Kirk Cousins is not clutch or injury resistant.
Madison?
No, because Madison would have converted the 4th and 1 against Seattle if he was clutch. But he is more likely to avoid turnovers. There is that. Man, this one's tough.
How about who's most likely to have their own PR firm behind them to let people know that they are clutch? Or that they are any of these things?
With Cousins, but also Dalvin Cook. No, unfortunately. Eric Kendricks.
Ooh.
Yeah, Kendricks does have notable turnovers, but he doesn't actually produce that many.
No.
But he's still a good player, right? He is mostly injury resistant. He did have one big injury last year, but he's mostly injury resistant. And he certainly finds moments to produce in big ways. So, Eric Kendricks, I'm sorry, you're the purebred Russian.
The gaming nerd asks for Arif and James' draft day fast food corner. Draft your top 3 fast food restaurants by any criteria you choose, except you obviously cannot pick the same restaurants because it is a draft. Franchise must be available in the Midwest.
In the Midwest.
I have first pick according to the message that I apparently didn't include in this. You're just going to have to trust me on this. My first overall pick is Five Guys.
That's pretty good. Five Guys is good. They have to be available in the Midwest, so I cannot choose like In-N-Out or Whataburger to counter the Five Guys. I'm going to go with Popeyes.
It goes with Popeyes. All right, second overall. Despite the fact that it's not open on Sundays, I think I'm going to try to acquire Chick-fil-A for this one.
All right, I'm going to take, I'd probably consider this a little bit of a sleeper, but I think, second round pick, Culver's.
Culver's? I never liked Culver's.
Really?
Culver's would not be in my top 5 big board.
Did not know. If I knew that, I would have waited until round 3. But Culver's, I think, is really remarkable. The Butterburger is overrated, I'll give you that, but it's still very good. The fried chicken's excellent. The concrete custard shake is phenomenal. I think the variety of stuff they do, the fact that they execute it at a really high level, and even if the Butterburger is overrated, it's still very good.
To me, the best thing about Culver's is the fries and the shakes. But I've eaten at Culver's an unfortunate number of times. I say unfortunate because I just don't enjoy it. And you get stuck in a relationship where that's the only thing the other person wants to eat. That's all you get to eat. And I don't know. I don't think I've ever had a good burger from there. I've liked the fries. I don't know.
Well, I got a specialist in Popeyes, and then I got a generalist in Culver's, so I'm pretty happy.
Well, if I'm going to go utility, for my last pick, I am going to go Sonic.
Oh, okay. That's good. We left a big one on the table here. I'm surprised it didn't go earlier. I just remembered it. Chipotle.
Chipotle is a 5-tool player right there.
Yeah, I think that probably won me the draft.
It's like Chipotle or either Chipotle or I say Wendy's. Wendy's does a lot of things well. Not everything clearly, but
very jack of all trades,
yeah.
Certainly.
I think that
I think a Culver's is a better Wendy's in that respect in doing all of those things.
And I would say that...
and if I need a chicken sandwich, I got Popeyes.
Yeah, you're pretty much set on that. Let's go to Tank B, who asks, for Arif and James's money-wasting corner. Really should be money laundering, really. What's the biggest waste of money? Buying Twitter, buying an NFT, or buying Packers stock? I am doing that thing where I'm envisioning the GIF where like corporate asks me to see the difference in these photos, and there is no difference.
I think that's the best answer. The second best answer, I think, is that the biggest waste of money is buying an NFT because you could lose money. Then it's the stock where the only money you're losing is the money you put in. You can only really buy one. And then buying Twitter, that can actually make you money.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best investment. Clearly it was advantageous, but, you know.
Yeah. Let's go to CH0, who asks, for Arif's reincarnation corner, given his affinity for the word rules, is it more likely that Arif is a former tyrannical despot or a former South Park character?
I'm a former Billy Madison character? The Doyle Rules?
Former South Park character or former tyrannical despot?
No, I chose former Billy Madison.
You're going with Billy Madison. Yeah. Okay.
The Doyle Rules.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Finally, Don from Ohio has 2 questions here. First off, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness will have multiple variant characters, Spider-Man, Professor X, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, etc. What Don variants would you actually get along with?
Let's say the universe where he's nice, but he fundamentally would not be Don.
No, that'd be like the Loki, where it turns out the Loki's the woman.
Right, yeah. One where Don is a pig. That's the one.
Is it? I realize this is getting dark, but are we in a situation where we can do like whole hog barbecue as well? So like,
I was not suggesting that we roast him alive and eat him, but that is on the table.
Okay, well that's a good time for Chelsea to come in. Hi, Chelsea.
Hey, Chelsea.
Let's go to our final question, which is for Arif and James' questionable relationship advice corner. Perfect. It's always a good place to end. My wife's birthday is in 3 weeks, and she's having girlfriends over for a brunch, which consists of mimosas, a charcuterie board, and the hot tub. Me being the awesome husband, awesome really should be in quotations here, awesome husband that I am taking the entire week off to make sure this is great and to make sure everything is prepped and done correctly. What would you recommend as a quality starter charcuterie board, since my wife has never had one before?
All right, so first I want to point out that the way you listed what was there at the brunch made it feel like you were eating the hot tub, or rather that they were eating the hot tub.
Yeah, this is why the Oxford comma exists, and I will die on the hill toward this goal. The Oxford comma.
My style guide prevents me from using an Oxford comma, so I cannot comment. But it certainly feels like your wife and her friends are consuming the hot tub, so get that figured out. That is not a good weekend for a number of reasons.
You're going to have a bad time.
Otherwise, Jim suggested the Joshua Weissman video on a $30 charcuterie board.
There's $30 versus $130.
Perfect.
So you can do that if you want to, be cheap to your wife. I mean, you're already lying to her a lot, so
yeah.
Why stop now? You can do that. Follow Arif's advice and just start lying to your spouse. It's fine.
That was not my advice.
Well,
it was never my advice.
That's what it turned into. So you can
do
that.
That's what he thought it turned into. But he's an adult who gets to make his own decisions to be responsible for it.
Yeah, about that. So you can do that, or you can do the $130 one as well, or you can just, depending on the number of mimosas involved, just go the Hormel route and just pick that up from your local grocer.
Why not?
At this point,
This is why I like Don the pig, because pigs are smart animals, and this would be smarter than Don.
I'm not going to disagree. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We will be back next week to talk all about the Vikings draft picks and all of that. So, Arif, there is plenty of your work online over at The Athletic. What do you got for them?
Yeah, so James is right that I'm milking all I can about the consensus board, so that's up at The Athletic. I've got, at this point, 65 boards, I want to say. in the consensus board, plus a bunch of pieces written off of it. I've got one where we talk about why Dan Brugler disagrees with where he disagrees with the consensus board. I just published who the most polarizing players are. I'm going to talk about the evaluator versus forecaster boards. I'm going to talk about which players are most likely to be overrated in drafts versus mock drafts on that consensus board, assuming that mock drafts are accurate. I'm going to be talking about player grades after the draft. I'm going to be updating the consensus board throughout the draft. I've got a Vikings big board that I've just published. There's all kinds of stuff that is built off of that consensus board, and you guys keep clicking on it. So do that over to theathletic.com/author/Reef-Hassan.
That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back next week to talk all about the draft. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you to Prye's Brewing Company for hosting us tonight. And we'll be back next week. And please remember that the Vikings are not to be trusted. We'll be back next week.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of The Athletic, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagoshnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.